A&M University. I want to take us back for a moment to March 12th, 2020. 1 year ago today, the Florida legislature was on the eve of completing the 2020 legislative session, one in which the governor declared 2020 as the, quote, year of the teacher, end quote. Schools had either begun or were beginning getting ready for spring break, and we were just beginning to learn about a virus called the coronavirus. The next day, March 13, 2020, will be a day that goes down in history. It was the last day of in-person learning for all of Florida's schools for the 2019-2020 school year. It was a day that our public school teachers and staff had to reimagine learning literally overnight. It was a day that parents had to find ways to explain to their children that they would not return to the school building for some time, and they would not see their friends on the playgrounds for a while either. Who knew then that our school buildings would remain closed till the end of the school year? The learning never stopped, but it certainly was and has been a very confusing and stressful time for Florida's children, families, and public schools. Today, we are going to hear from a couple of parents, a bus driver, and a teacher. These individuals will help us understand and paint a picture of what learning, teaching, and working in our public schools is like during a pandemic. We're going to start today with Tabitha Patashal, a St. Johns County parent of 2 children in the public schools. Her daughter is currently learning virtually, while her son is currently in the brick and mortar middle school. So Tabitha, if you'll unmute yourself and take it away.
Hi, thank you for having me. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the teachers and more so about their connection than even so much the academics, because this was such a, and we use this word so much, an unprecedented time. But last year, my son had just finished, he was the understudy for Oliver. He attends a Title I school, but it's also the arts school. And he had just finished, and they got to do their performance a week before school shut down. And I look back on that, and the fact he got to do that was absolutely incredible. And he's a very anxious kid. So we had to explain to him, his dad is also a doctor, so he knew what was going on. So he had that coming in, and we had that, but his teachers at his middle school were phenomenal. He's such an on top of it kid that I really hadn't gotten to know them. I actually got to know his teachers because of this pandemic, which I think, you look on the bright side of things. When schools shut down, they did Connection, they did a movie night. And because they are a Title I school, a lot of the lower income kids live near the school. They pop popcorn for them, and they encouraged us to post our pictures of our movie night on Instagram. And those kids would go and they would walk over to the school, and their teachers would serve them popcorn if they didn't have popcorn. And then we could share our movie nights. We also had trivia that he did with some of his teachers that I'd only heard about, but I got to see them for the first time through Zoom and get to know their personalities. And I remember one kid had his air conditioner break down, and he needed to vent about that during the trivia night. So we took time out and spent time in the chat, and his teachers were there for him, and just seeing them really supporting these kids. We had the science teachers provided STEM challenges, and I saw so many kids send in their STEM, and then they would send us videos, and then they got them involved in announcements. So I felt like I actually got to be part of a school that I really didn't, because my son was off and independent, and I got to really get to know these teachers and how they took it up to next notch. And he's back in school. We sent him back after first quarter, and he's back in school, and still I'm watching what they do to make things happen. They're an art school. They thrive on their theater. They were like, this is like the big sports game, and they return to sports, but it's hard to return to theater. But his theater teachers and chorus teachers are making it work. And I remember I was sitting in on a meeting, and his principal was like, we have to remember for these kids, we bench them from theater. So they found a way to make it work safely. I won't get to go and see his performance, but they're still getting to do theater in the school. I also, my mom was hired at my neighborhood school right after we applied for my daughter to go to state virtual school. And just watching her, I'll often call her and she'll be sitting at school. It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, you're still at school? But she's done distance and in person, and she's so invested in her kids. So I get to see her as a teacher in Florida. And I have a friend down the street whose kids are homeschooled, and she actually texted me on Saturday. She's like, my son's friend's teacher came to his tennis tournament, and he was so excited that his teacher was coming. She's like, it was your mom. I would love to return. Like, she's connecting. I didn't even know my mom was at this kid's tennis tournament, and she's investing in these kids, and she just wants the best for them. I remember my daughter's teacher last year at her school, she would call weekly and check in. And my daughter's like, why is she checking in? I was like, because she cares about you. She is making a phone call to everybody. That's because she wants to know. So I've just seen, I know there is a lot of pressure on teachers this year, but they are so invested in these kids. And I've been blown away. I was a former teacher. I'm now at home, but I'm not sure that I could have done it, but I would have stepped up too. Like I have seen all of these teachers do. So
thank you, Tabitha. Great. And just so everyone knows, Tabitha does have another commitment, so she may be jumping off at some point soon. But thank you, Tabitha.
Thank you.
We're going to go to Clyde Mitchell. Clyde Mitchell is a bus driver in Orange County. He has worked for Orange County Public Schools since 2012. He's going to talk a little bit about what it's like transporting kids during a pandemic. And also he's going to talk a little bit about some of his coworkers who've been impacted or had COVID. Clyde?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me. Talking concerning about a bus driver, it gets very rough on that, dealing with the kids, trying to keep them social distancing, constantly reminding them and wearing their masks and hand sanitizer. We have hand sanitizers on the bus. If a child comes to the bus without a mask, we have to give them a mask on the bus. And we constantly have to clean our bus. Every time we drop off at the school, we have to sanitize our bus. At every school, I sanitize my bus at least 4 times a day with my kids. And it's rough for the kids because they used to be in a group talking with their peers. Now, you can't, when you're having 20 to 30, sometimes 40 kids on a bus, it's very difficult. And we can see the impact with the drivers, very stressful with the drivers and stuff. A lot of them, some of the kids coming sick, they have to stay home, and the drivers have to stay home because they have to quarantine themselves. And we see it from the teacher's standpoint. It's very rough with the teachers, and sometimes it's hard to keep the student to wear their mask. Some of them don't understand. We have to explain to them the importance of it, because you're taking it back home to your parents, and then everybody else is infected with that. So we're trying to, do safely with our students and treat them all fairly, make sure that they understand and everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Clyde. I appreciate that, given that perspective, especially as we transport so many kids back and forth throughout the state. Next, we're going to have Sarah Frederick, a Polk County teacher whose daughter is a 9th grade special needs student. And Sarah is an incredible advocate for kids with special needs, including her daughter. So, Sarah?
Thank you. I'm just a parent, special needs parent, and an advocate, not a teacher. Just wanted to clear that.
Yep.
Okay, so I wrote this down because I had a lot to say and I didn't want to miss anything. In March of 2020, when the shutdown hit, it was really uncertain and scary for not only me, but
Sarah,
my daughter.
Sarah, could you turn your camera back on? It seems to have clicked off.
Oh.
Perfect. Thank you.
Uh-oh. Okay, can you see me now?
Yep, we can. You're perfect.
All right, perfect. It was very scary for her. She really didn't get or understand what was happening, why she couldn't go to school, why she couldn't see her friends. We explained the importance to her, but she still really didn't get it. So what I did as a parent was made sure that she stayed connected with her teachers. All of her teachers reached out daily. And then I kept her connected with her friends. They did Zoom meetings and hangouts. And, there were times where it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I could hear giggling coming from her bedroom. And Any other time I would have, said, what are you doing? Get off the phone. But during the pandemic, it was what they all needed at that time. So, I kind of encourage that as well. That kind of got us through the first part when, after spring break, the distance learning. And then I was part of, for Polk County Public Schools, we had a reopening task force. So I got to be a part of that. So I got to see the inner workings, what it would look like when the kids would return back, the safety precautions, the guidelines, if we were going to mandate masks, if we weren't going to mandate masks. And the school that she goes to is a very small school. And knowing that only half of the kids that were going to come back to brick and mortar, it would lessen her exposure anyways. They were mandating masks. All the teachers were on board. They wanted to come back. They were going to protect the kids as well. I was able to send her to school confidently. We only had to quarantine once when she went back, and it was just out of precaution. It was somebody who hadn't been there, in over a week, but they just wanted to make sure everybody was okay. But, we've been doing great. She's been doing great. Her teachers are phenomenal. Hands down, if I have a problem, they've always been there, 100%. Her para, she has a para specific. She would call and just, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Let's play Uno. They would play a game online. Her para would play a game online with Nevaeh for 10 minutes, just to make sure that, she was doing okay. That's unheard of, but in this time, everybody is doing their part. Everybody wants to help. Parents, teachers, administration, everybody. It's been a great experience for us. It's scary. Yes, absolutely. But as far as her teachers and the staff and everybody kind of working together to make sure that she's okay and all the students are okay here in Polk County. I think our teachers here in Florida are the best in the nation. And, supporting them and doing what we can as a community, as parents, as stakeholders, it has to be done because they are taking care of the children of our future. We love them, we support them, and we need to take care of them as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. That was a great story, especially about the paraprofessional. So
Yes.
We're next going to move to LaTanya Starks, who is a teacher in Lee County. She's on her break right now, so we're going to let her speak, and then she may have to go as well. And LaTanya actually had COVID, and so she's going to talk a little bit about what it's like to have operated during COVID and to still be working in our schools. So LaTanya?
I want to start by saying, Tabitha, Sarah, Clyde, thank you so much for sharing your stories as well. And it has been a rough and rocky, year, if we consider back to March when we all first got out. And I think first about that time and how we transformed our curriculum from what was in person to like this digital platform. And I felt very much like I wanted to work with my colleagues and my community to make sure that we were able to do as much to keep our students on track as possible. But then we all kind of had to humble ourselves and realize that what that might look like was going to be a lot different during a pandemic than what we had in mind. You create all these plans, and then the children tell you what you're going to be able to do with them. And so we learned very quickly how to adjust and readjust as necessary. And that's why you see, families who we connect with so much, like, what Tabitha said, because we want to make sure that first and foremost, we take care of, their heart, their spirit, because we don't want them feeling broken when it comes to education, because they're not going to be able to learn anything if they don't feel like that part of them is cared for first and foremost. So the ending last year, the way that we did was challenging, but I found myself doing some of those same things you're describing, playing Kahoot with my son and my students at the same time was nothing I ever thought would happen. But it was what they needed at that time, and we all felt very connected. I felt connected to families, and I understood families and what they were going through more than I ever had, more than I ever thought I could. So it was a closeness that can't be duplicated. Going into this year, I will say, when the fall hit and it was like, hey, these are the guidelines, these are the things that we needed. And we get into the classroom and realize 6 foot of distancing isn't going to happen. There's no way unless you have smaller class sizes. And it's unfortunate because I actually have probably more students this year at this point than I've had in previous years because of you're losing a lot of teachers who are older and unable to come in and work in this environment. And it was a hard choice for me. And I'm not just even saying just older teachers, but teachers who are very nervous about working in this environment. I have had COVID at this point, and I will be honest with you, it was the scariest thing to me because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I'm not like in top physical physique, so I was a little nervous, but it's okay. I do have some lingering effects. My blood pressure remains high even at this point, and I've had to start a blood pressure medication, which made me feel frustrated because I don't really like taking medicine, even when I'm sick. So I've had a continuous stream of students out for stretches of time, and not just because there was a suspected case, but because they actually were sick themselves. But in our community, a lot of the families aren't really comfortable with being tested. So truthfully, while I had 6 students out who left with a fever, or a headache, or a fever and a headache, a stomach ache or vomiting, none of them were tested. And so I had half of my classroom, I'm looking in that direction, half of my classroom out, but no one, testing positive because no one's being tested. So those things don't get counted in the numbers, and it's scary. When we started this school year, though, just the idea of building this community with my kids and teaching them how to use their mask properly and how to clean properly, I really and truly wanted to make the best of the situation and make sure that they understood that they weren't fearful, but also understood how to operate in this environment. Again, taking care of just every part of them. But being what I feel like I'm being a teacher and a custodian and crying at night because I feel like I failed because my students still got sick. We're very, it is close, and I have worked hard to distance them in the classroom, but it is hard because we have students, and so they're kids and they want to be together by every nature. And I love that about them, and I couldn't imagine being without them. The 2 weeks that I was out or so, while I was sick, it was hard. I sent the messages and I recorded my voice, and, I was worried they'd be nervous because it was hard for me to catch my breath. COVID is a difficult thing to go through. So it was a really challenging time. And I do feel like at this point, I just got vaccinated yesterday, so I'm feeling really optimistic. But I really, really am looking forward to seeing some legislation that impacts our students in a positive way. With the amount that our students have been out, I can't imagine seeing them sit down to take the FSA. I feel like that's time that could be spent. And if we do take it, them being held accountable for scores when they've been out for huge chunks of the school year. So that was a little bit discouraging to me to see that that's continuing. And some of the other legislation that is makes things difficult for teachers and students. So I appreciate you guys' stories, and I appreciate being here today. Thank you. I know I probably went over a bit.
Good stuff, LaTanya. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our speakers. Before we take questions, I just want to say, when our schools reopened in August, there was absolutely a lot of uncertainty and concerns by parents, teachers, our staff, and other school officials. Yet, because of the hard work you just heard about and the unquestionable dedication of our teachers and staff, our public school buildings did reopen. Teachers and staff again reimagined what learning would look like. Some students returned in person, as you heard, and while others learned through their computer screen. We all now know that our public schools are the best place for kids to learn, that our public schools are essential to our families and our communities. We just heard that, and that our public schools are vital to our economic well-being. But the reopening of our schools was not without sadness and disruption. With nearly 81,000 COVID cases in our schools and a loss of around 40 educators, we know the virus has had an impact in a very real way. We have too many stories to tell with loved ones who are gone and must wonder if everything was done that could have been done to save the lives and slow the spread of this awful virus. We know we have a massive teacher and staff shortage. We were dealing with those massive shortages before the pandemic. And we know the pandemic has only made those shortages worse. This is arguably the biggest crisis facing our public schools as we move forward. When major Florida universities are contemplating the idea of closing their colleges of education, we know we have a major problem. Again, last year was called the year of the teacher by the governor and some lawmakers. But if you ask Florida teachers if they felt that last year was the year of the teacher, I believe you would get a resounding no. The question now is, what will this year be? Will this year be the year to demoralize our teachers? The truth is, we still have a long way to go. We need lawmakers to support our public schools, our students, our teachers, and our staff. This past year has proven once again that no matter the circumstances, Florida's public school teachers and staff will do whatever it takes to educate our children well. Those who work in our public schools care about kids, families, and getting the job done. This is why today we announce we are launching a new ad campaign aimed at showcasing the work of our public schools and our members, while we call on lawmakers to focus on what we need to help Florida's children. The legislature cannot be distracted by some lawmakers who look to take away the freedoms and rights of our dedicated and loving teachers and staff. This ad will air this weekend digitally in English and Spanish across our state, and will air for the next few weeks. Here's the ad, if we can play it.
It was scary, reopening classrooms in the middle of a pandemic. Florida public school teachers and staff put the needs of our kids, families, and communities before their own, doing their part every day to keep the learning going and the economy moving. Now it's Tallahassee's turn. Tell your state senator, oppose legislation that limits the freedoms of teachers. It's time to support our teachers, for our kids and their future. Paid for by the Florida Education Association.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll have a link for that for the press as well. But teachers and staff need to be free to do what is right for kids and to join together to support and promote the kinds of public schools our children deserve, regardless of their race, background, or zip code. In America and in Florida, we value freedom. Our public school teachers and staff and our professors at our colleges and universities should have the same freedoms as anyone else. The freedom to join together in union. You know, thanks to the President of the United States, all who work in our public schools now have access to the vaccine. We just heard that from LaTanya. And that not only protects their health and their well-being of our teachers, staff, and students, but it gives hope for some level of normalcy soon. But even when we get back to that sense of normal, our teachers and staff know we have a lot of work to do to address the needs of our students, both emotionally and academically. Public schools is where childhood happens, and every parent wants their children to be happy and excited about learning. This pandemic not only demonstrated the value and importance of our public schools, it has also shown just how much our teachers and staff love their children. In fact, when you talk to a teacher or staff person, they will call their students their kids, their babies, their children. This is not the time to limit the freedoms and handcuff our teachers, nor is it the time to undermine our public schools. Now is the time for lawmakers to do right by our teachers, our staff, and our students. Let's make this the year for public education, and let's make it the decade for our schools, for our children, and for Florida's future. Thank you so much, and we will answer any questions. Again, if you raise your hand, if you're on the phone, *9, we'll do the same as raising your hand, and of course, we'll go from there. Sharon, am I turning it over to you?
Sure. I'm Joe McLean from Jacksonville. Joe, I'm going to allow you to talk. You might have to unmute yourself, and please state what station you're with.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, this is Joe McLean. I'm with News 4 Jax, WJXT in Jacksonville. I wanted to ask, looking ahead, you mentioned that returning to some sense of normalcy, that there is some hope for that. I just wanted to look ahead to the fall and see what, if any, recommendations or predictions that the association has for reopening this fall, if it is going to attain that normalcy.
So, as teachers and staff in Florida are getting access to the vaccine, we are seeing them go. A poll we just did showed like 90% of our members want to get that vaccine. And I think we're seeing that across the state. As soon as educators were allowed, they're getting that vaccine. So the hope is that the vaccine will have been not just in our, not to those in our schools that have access to it, but everyone. And that will bring back some of that normalcy. So when we open schools, in the fall, and quite honestly, even this summer, I think the focus has to be on the academic and emotional well-being of our students. And that's what we're calling on. We need to make sure we have clear summer programs that help our students, that get them connected back together, that go to an enrichment kind of thing and an engaging curriculum for our students during the summer, especially those who may have struggled through online or the transitions. We have to recognize that although our teachers and staff in schools have done amazing work, it's not been without disruption. We heard LaTanya talk about it. We've heard others where kids have been quarantined, teachers have been quarantined, staff have been quarantined. That has created disruption. And the big thing here now is focusing on how do we build and make sure that kids are getting everything they need that they may have struggled with this year because of those disruptions. And so it's going to be a focus on academics. It's going to be a focus on emotional learning. And it's going to be a focus on getting everyone back together.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Sharon?
Yes. Lexi Nall, I'm going to unmute you. Please identify yourself with your media outlet's name.
Hi there, Lexi Nall from CBS 12 News in West Palm Beach here. I'm wondering, what legislation are you all specifically supporting or proposing to help our teachers with that advertisement you showed us?
So first of all, to help our teachers, we think there are a couple of things. Senate Bill 886, which would, as we heard from some of our speakers, talked about the idea of not having the high stakes testing this year. It doesn't actually stop testing, but it takes the high stakes nature away from it. We know in a normal year, high stakes testing is extremely stressful for students, for our teachers and staff, and for our public schools as a whole. And so this year, it just seems to make more sense to focus on the kids and not on the testing. Doing the testing and getting an idea of what's really going on is perfectly acceptable. Saying we're going to retain third graders based on it, saying we're going to keep kids from graduating based on it, that we're going to grade schools, that we're going to evaluate teachers, that doesn't make sense. So that's Senate Bill 886, which is a great piece of legislation that we think should be passed. It was passed in its first committee in the Senate, and that will help kids and our schools. Other legislation, we think we have to address the teacher shortage. So we have legislation, and I'll look for a minute here for the number, but we have legislation that actually talks about creating salary equity in our schools. Last year was the year of the teacher, but so many teachers were left out. So all of our education staff professionals, our bus drivers like Clyde, were left out of that entire equation. We need that to be more of a local control issue. There are 15 different laws and rules on the books that guide or direct or interfere with what districts do in regards to paying teachers and staff. And if we're going to address that teacher shortage, we have to address that bureaucracy. And then, of course, the bills we are concerned about, House Bill 835 and House Bill 947, are directly limitations on freedoms for our teachers and staff in terms of being able to come together and freely speak up for kids and what's going on in our schools. And that is not what lawmakers should be focused on. We should be focusing on our kids and helping our public schools and recognizing how much our public schools teachers and staff have done this year. As you heard from all of our speakers, from Tabitha and Sarah and Clyde just blanked on her name, sorry, Latanya, you heard from them about the amazing things that they've done. And that's what lawmakers should be recognizing and appreciating.
Awesome, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lexi. Andrew, we have a couple questions in the chat. William Velez from Telemundo in Tampa asked, at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of issues with the state about reopening schools or distance education. Now that we are 1 year after, what did you learn about this? Did you still think decisions should be better? Thank you.
Yeah, great question, William. I would say this. I think we learned that our public schools were not the super spreaders we were fearful of, but we clearly had COVID in our schools. We clearly saw some spread of COVID, and we clearly lost lives to COVID. We had a tremendous amount of quarantining disruption in the learning process. So could decisions have been made? We can Monday morning quarterback all the time, but one of the things we were advocating for was really doing everything possible to protect our students and the people who work in our schools. We wanted to see mask mandates. We wanted to see regular cleaning. We wanted to see social distancing, all things that the medical community and the scientists said were necessary. And a lot of those things were very challenging in our schools. You heard Latanya talk about having more kids now in her classroom than she had in other years. We've heard that over and over again around the state, that our classrooms are very crowded and there is not social distancing. We know of a teacher who literally went to GoFundMe to raise money for a hand washing station for her portable classroom that doesn't have running water, so that kids could wash their hands on the way in and throughout the day to help keep the spread down. Those are things where we really wish there was more support during the COVID crisis and continue. This has been an extremely stressful year. We're not saying we're out of the woods yet. We're not saying that this was success. We are saying there's a lot that we could have done and should have done, and there's a lot we still need to do going forward. Sharon?
We have Teresa Marcinberg. I'm going to allow her to speak. Teresa?
Hi, can you hear me? This is Teresa from the Florida Channel. I just wanted to, you touched on some pieces of legislation. I wanted to get your thoughts on the private school voucher bill, the expansion, and is that a concern for you all this year? I have seen some testimony, but that, as you know, that's on the move.
Yeah, so I will say on Senate Bill 48, it's once again an attempt by the legislature to really disadvantage our public schools and try to advantage private schools. There's less oversight in that bill. It expands to homeschooling and many other things. Let me say this. If public schools, where 90% of our kids go, have the support they need, there's no better place for kids to learn. We've seen that during the pandemic. And so I find it interesting that lawmakers continue to try to disadvantage our public schools, overregulate our public schools, at the same time as trying to incentivize and deregulate private schools or others, right? And so that's where, to me, it goes to show that our public schools are the best place for kids to learn. And if we invest in our public schools, and if lawmakers support the people who work there, the parents, the students, then there's no competition, right? In my mind, because our public schools are that strong. We have the best teachers, the best staff, as you heard. We have the best programs. We care about our kids, and that's what drives us more than anything. When you have private schools that pop up for the purposes of making profits, as some of those private schools do for the vouchers, when there's no oversight or accountability, when they can hire people who have criminal records or don't have degrees or aren't certified, that makes no sense. And there's no oversight on taxpayer dollars going to that. And it's really just so they can advantage that kind of thing. At the end of the day, our public schools are where kids learn, and it's where they have their childhood.
Thank you.
Jacob, I've unmuted you. Unmute yourself and identify your media outlet, please. Thank you.
This is Jacob Ogles from Florida Politics. You alluded to the USF College of Education closing. Can you tell me if you think the legislature needs to step in and make sure that there's still colleges of education that are opening, or whether they should stop the USF College of Education from closing?
Yeah, so I believe USF has said they're not going to close that College of Education. A couple of years ago or so, UCF actually merged their College of Education with the College of Innovation because there weren't enough students. What the best thing lawmakers can do is support our educators. Instead of saying it's the year of the teacher, demonstrate it. Demonstrate that our teachers and our staff and our public schools are valued for the work they do all the time. And they can do that, as I said, by addressing some of the issues that drive these teacher shortages. I do have in front of me now the salary equity bills and fairness. They're really fairness bills. The salary fairness bills are House Bill 865 by Representative Placencia and Senate Bill 1610 by Senator Jones. That's one way to do that. Giving teachers some continuity in their contract. Continuity of learning is vital, and continuity of the people who are in the schools. I think you heard Tabitha talking about it. Teachers make connections with their students all the time, and making sure that those teachers are there year after year is vitally important, which is why we would call on the lawmakers to look at House Bill 1479 and Senate Bill 1782, which gives some stability to teachers so they're not getting a pink slip at the end of every year, even though they're doing a fantastic job. So those are some things they can do that would address the fact that students aren't going into the profession anymore at our colleges and universities in the numbers they used to. And by the way, you can tag a lot of that back to 2009 and between 2009 and 2011, when the legislature passed a lot of legislation that really chipped away at the rights and the freedoms of our teachers in our schools.
Joe, you have a follow-up for Tabitha. I'm unmuting you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Tabitha, as a teacher, what are you most looking forward to after the pandemic is no longer?
So I am a former teacher. My mom is a teacher. I have actually.
I apologize.
So I know that she's just looking forward for things to. I'll talk for her because I asked her if I could throw her out there, and I know she's just looking forward to being able to be more open with her kids. I'm looking forward to getting my daughter back. I think it's just the connection and not having to wear masks. I think they're very important. My husband's a doctor. We do that, but just being able to see people in person, I think some of the connection is lost in the classroom, even though I think that we have more connection in some ways. So,
if I could put the same question to Clyde and Sarah as well, just if you don't mind answering quickly, thank you.
Could you ask the question again, please?
Yes, what are you most looking forward to post-pandemic?
I'm looking forward for more for the kids to come back. And I miss my kids. I consider them as my babies. I drive elementary, high school. I do 2 high schools, elementary and a middle school. So I'm looking forward for them to come back and in a safe environment and a safe way.
Thanks, Clyde. Sarah?
So what I'm looking forward to the most is being able to hug the kids, hug your friends, hug your family, and not have to worry about, in 2 weeks, am I going to have COVID? Just that kind of, that touch, that handshake, just being around people without concern, having friends, sleep over, with my daughter, and just having that closer bond that we've lost since COVID. That's what we're looking forward to.
And I'll add to it, Joe. I have 2 daughters. I have a daughter who's a senior at Atlantic High School in Port Orange, and my youngest daughter has just started middle school in 6th grade at Ormond Beach Middle School. And for my daughter who's graduating, obviously this year they've already been told most of the graduation activities are not going to happen this year. They're still going to have their graduation, but I want her to be able to connect with her friends, obviously, and she still is excited about graduating, which I think most of our kids are, and she's excited about going to college next year. And of course, what's that going to look like? And then for my 6th grader, it's the same thing. She hasn't been able to have sleepovers, something that's very common among kids that age, and be able to interact with her friends as much as they usually do, because it's COVID, and we're trying to do everything possible to protect our kids. So that, I think every parent wants that, right? We want our kids to be excited about learning. We want them to be happy when they're going to school. We want them learning should be fun. I think back to my childhood. I have fond memories of school. I think most of us, if not all of us, do, because we interact with our friends, we learn, it's not just about the textbook, right? It's more than that. And so that's part of it. And, one thing I think I want to add that I haven't mentioned in terms of bill, there's a bill, and it's going to be coming up again next week, which even limits the freedoms of our students, right, in choosing what degree they go to if they qualify for bright futures. We got to support kids. We got to support our students. We want our kids to get a lot out of life and put a lot into life, and limiting their opportunities just doesn't make sense.
Andrew, there are no further questions, but I would like to remind reporters, if they have follow-up questions or would like a copy of the recording, to please contact Joni Branch. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you. Well, let me just end with this. Our public schools, as you've heard, have done amazing work in the last year, and it hasn't been easy. It's been extremely stressful. We face lots of challenges. Our teachers, our staff, our parents, our students have stepped up, but make no mistake about it. It is not a normal year. It is not a normal year. And while lawmakers are working in the legislature in a building that's essentially closed to the public, it is time for them to support. We're calling on them to support us, to support our teachers, to support our staff, to support our students, to support our public schools. Support us, because we've had the back of Florida. The governor in his speech mentioned that it was the opening of public schools that allowed Florida's economy to get moving again. Our public schools have a personal connection to our communities. They've been open since August, and they've been open because of the teachers and staff that you heard from today, and teachers and staff around our state. And we shouldn't forget that. I want to thank everyone. Have a good weekend. Appreciate your time. Bye.